Hey, John here from beautiful Western New York. Having only been a part of the Officers Club for about 4 months, it has already become clear to me that while the free content was great, access to the Officers Club content leaves absolutely nothing missed. If the Ask a Guide shows are your cup of tea, consider the Officers Club. Actively participating in these shows and asking questions really set this podcast apart from the rest.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And today we are talking about something that happened in Gettysburg after the battle, several years after the battle, 6 years-ish after the battle, if you want to be exact. In 1869, there was a fella named Frederick Douglass. You might have heard of him. You might have seen him in his hit film Glory. He came here to give a speech, and with us today is our friend, licensed battlefield guide, Kevin Bryant. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Matthew.
Hey, you're going to speak to us about Frederick's visit here. He gave a speech here.
He does.
So we were talking beforehand, and what was interesting about the conversation is I said, who was he invited by? And you said,
we don't know.
We don't know. And I said, well, what was the occasion? Was it a big event, like a festival or something? And you said
that at this point in time, Frederick Douglass is on a massive speaking tour. So he's making a bunch of stops across a bunch of states.
So Freddie's on the road.
Yep, which is what he does throughout his life.
Right.
Before and after.
So you're making some money doing that, you know?
That's right. Going on tour.
And so he's on the road, and then someone, but there's a suspicion as to who it might have been that invited him, right?
There is, yeah. So there's two major newspapers operating in Gettysburg at the time. We believe the editor of the Star and Sentinel.
Okay.
Probably the most likely person, just based on the newspaper accounts. They seem to have some of the earliest clues as to suggesting there's some conversations he's coming. It's all been secured. They're the first releasing it. It makes sense.
Got it. Okay. And we don't know exactly what he said here.
Right. However, when he traveled on these speaking tours, he so often utilized similar, if not the identical speech. Because, in an era before stuff like we're doing nowadays, your words aren't blasted out on YouTube or something where people are not there, can't hear you. So you can use the same speech over and over. We know the speech series he was giving here. We know the descriptions of his time in Gettysburg reference the subject and the material, and it matches. So with a high degree of confidence, we know probably the bulk.
And why would he use the same speech everywhere else and then do something totally different for here?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Maybe he would add a thing or two, pertinent to the place that he is, if there's something to say. Like, this is a great battle here, so why not say something about that?
That's exactly what he does in other places.
Yeah.
So I'm very confident he likely made some very specific Gettysburg references to his audience. As to what they are, we don't know.
So, given that we don't know what he actually said here, we do know that he did say the same things as you're saying now elsewhere. So, give us an idea of what his speech might have covered. And how long was it?
Yeah, so his speech is going to last a long time.
Really?
This is at a time period when this, giving speeches at this time, this is entertainment.
Do that again. Long time. Wait, hold on. Do it now. Do it like that.
His speech is going to last a long time. Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to do it again.
All right, so go ahead.
So these speeches would take forever. These speeches are a form of entertainment that would go on. So sometimes, thinking in a specific Gettysburg context, people like to make fun of Edward Everett or things going on like, he talked for all these hours. And Lincoln shows up for 2 minutes like, what's wrong with him? Like, that's normal. That's what you would expect. This is like your movie, your entertainment.
We didn't have 2-hour movies back then.
That's right. So you can just sit back, relax, and enjoy these masterful public speakers who take you through the whole emotional flip back and forth. His subject, though, is a really weird one for us today. He's going to talk about a guy named William the Silent.
William the Silent.
16th century Dutch leader.
Okay.
He's trying to make some connections. Douglass is at a period in his life where he is trying to expand kind of his repertoire as the public perceives. Because so many people in the public believe that Frederick Douglass, this most famous formerly enslaved person in American history, that's all he's going to talk about. That's what people are expecting him to talk about.
Makes sense.
Slavery, inhumanity, the abolition. And he's trying to really cement his role in the post-Civil War period as one of this founding generation of a new America, commenting on all sorts of this new stuff,
of
including history interwoven into your studies of culture, of society, of politics, of the evolution.
Putting things into perspective.
Yeah, so this is a deep reach for him. He's intentionally trying to broaden modern America by connecting it to previous world history.
Okay.
And for us today, this is going to be a strange kind of reach, but again, generally, audiences at the time would be a little more well-read, likely, on some of these kind of classical moments in history than some of us today.
Okay.
So a whole bunch of the audience getting together, this wouldn't be that foreign of like, why are we talking about something that was 300 years ago?
Yeah.
They're going to have a few key points of reference into it.
So give me some specifics, though, of what he talks about. What does he say?
So one of the things about William the Silent, he's going to have, he's assassinated by gunshot in 1584, and so Douglass is constantly making connections across time, and among those things, William the Silent is, we believe, the first head of state ever in world history to be assassinated by a gunshot. So he's going to do that connection.
Quite a distinction.
Quite an unfortunate distinction. They're going from the first, well, it's believed to be the first one, and then into more recently, maybe their most recent head of state with President Lincoln's assassination. You're going to talk about the war, William the Silent's leading through this 80 Years' War that's going on. He's drawing comparisons. When the 80 Years' War is going to start over there, it's not as clear what the purpose of the war was about. It's when our war was beginning. It wasn't as clear to many folks what the war was about. You know, this sense of union, but like, what is that? Talking about the dynamic characteristics of these leaders and how they are emerging. What does it take to lead through an unclear war that can go for an extended period of time? What can it take to bring a nation through reform forward? Because William the Silent is a dedicated reformer of justice, and he's going to contrast it saying, well, Lincoln became a reformer.
Yeah.
But he didn't necessarily start that way.
Right.
And so he's...
And Fred had a good hand in that, though, right? He was
absolutely.
He was needling him all along, right?
And that's a key thing for the speech that would give some of it teeth. It's not just his historical observations based on reading biographies and newspapers. Like Frederick Douglass knew Abraham Lincoln,
right?
Like he had extensive communication with him on multiple meetings where they talked for hours.
Yeah,
sometimes. So he's bringing that personal vein of, again, very recent history.
Right.
It's January 25th, 1869. Just 5.5 years after this battle, but the war's only been not even over 4 years.
Right. At
this point, Lincoln's not been dead 4 years, and this is a man who talked to him who had probably far more profound influence on Lincoln's thought than we can even fully trace.
Oh, I'm sure
through their conversations. And like the America that these folks are now living in Gettysburg, 1869, whether they'd recognize it or not, whether Douglass would recognize it or not, is going to have some of the threads of his fingerprints on it, working through Lincoln and now conflict into the Johnson administration.
Do you think that, Lincoln going from I don't want to touch slavery to we're freeing the slaves is primarily due to Frederick Douglass's conversations with him? Or, I mean, I know that a lot of people will say, well, it was, it was a war, like another arrow in his quiver to fight and win the war. And, he didn't really care about, that's what the Southern apologists like to say. No, he didn't really care about slavery.
Yeah.
He's just doing it to, okay, well, either way.
Right.
They should have been freed in the first place, and they shouldn't have been slaves. So who cares what the reason is for it? It was the right thing to do.
What's it they say in the movie? We should have freed the slaves, then fired on.
Yeah,
something.
exactly. So do you think that Frederick Douglass had a good amount of influence on him for that?
I don't think so.
No.
Honestly.
Okay.
I think Douglass's words may have certainly reached Lincoln by that time, but their in-person meetings will happen after the Emancipation Proclamation has already kind of been issued.
Were they writing to each other before?
No, not as far as we know. But I guess I should say they're not directly writing to each other, but Frederick Douglass is absolutely writing to Abraham Lincoln in those first 2 years of the war. He is running a newspaper.
Okay.
It is a massively powerful journalistic weapon that Douglass is using. And in this, from the moment the war busts out, he is holding Lincoln's feet to the fire through his editorials.
Okay.
And we know from some other references that Lincoln got a few of these editorials kind of handed to him by aides or things. When Douglass does arrive for their in-person meetings, he acknowledges, I already know who you are. We need to have some conversations. Douglass is pushing him and pushing, basically saying, from Frederick Douglass's point of view, it is very clear what this war is about from the beginning.
Yeah.
And until you acknowledge that on behalf of the federal government and do something about that, we will always be fighting this war with half of our strength tied behind our back. Lincoln is hearing this damage done constantly to him in the press. Not just from Douglass, but again, Douglass is a dominant voice inside the broader journalistic circles. So when they meet, again, Emancipation Proclamation has already been issued and already gone into effect. They don't meet till August of 1863. So a month after even this battle. And so I don't know that we can trace Lincoln's full progress and say, this is Frederick Douglass who's doing these things. But I think you can trace from that point forward Lincoln's evolution in the 64 and 65 as he and Douglass continue meeting.
Because that's interesting, because my impression until today, and I think I got this from the Ken Burns documentary, was I don't think they blatantly said it, but the implication through the way they edited it and wove the quotes in and all this other stuff was that, Lincoln was moved to this by Douglass, or at least that's what I walked away with, and I'm half a moron, so it could very well be that I just totally misunderstood things. But that's what I always came away with, is that, Frederick Douglass was kind of like in Lincoln's ear all the time. But I guess he kind of was, being that he had a newspaper.
He has a powerful newspaper.
So like, Lincoln may not be talking directly with anybody, Douglass in this case, but he's certainly aware,
unquestionably,
of what is being said.
Because, just for example, when they do meet this first time, when Douglass and Lincoln come together, there's no appointment or anything. Douglass just shows up in the White House. As, you could do that at the time. And there's all this room full of people waiting there because everybody's trying to get their appointment, your meeting. And you could wait a couple hours to get with the president. Douglass walks in, presents his card, it's given to the secretary, takes it through the door. He settles in for a long wait. Within 2 minutes, he's already in there to see the president.
Yeah.
Much you can imagine, to the anger and frustration of a lot of the white men waiting around.
I'll bet.
That thing that Douglass gets this, free skip the line pass thing to go straight and talk to the president because they know who he is.
Yeah.
Even if they wouldn't have, recognized him directly walking in.
Sure. Well, but
we need to talk now.
But they're seeing a black man being pulled ahead of them.
Yeah. That's how the white folks around
right.
are seeing it. Absolutely. And it's like, this is just proof. More of kind of what.
Right. And then they become they're newly minted Confederates after seeing that.
That doesn't help.
No, I'm sure not.
Folks. Yeah.
And so, okay. So when Frederick Douglass here, now, if I recall, he was at some kind of a event center or some kind of
agricultural hall,
which is not there anymore.
It doesn't exist anymore. It's on the corner of High and Franklin.
So where
M&T Bank, High Street Brews.
Yeah. High Street Brews, M&T Bank, and then there's some condos there.
There's a little housing complex development there.
So that's where that all was.
Yep. The site exists, but there's building long gone.
It's all. So and that's where he gave the speech.
And when he shows up, the agricultural hall is brand new. It's only been there about 2 years, so it wasn't here, during battle period of Gettysburg.
Right. Yeah, this is a post-battle building.
Right, I think it's 1867 that's going to show up. It'll last till the late 1880s.
Okay.
Or so, but Douglass arrives, it's got this big hall in it that's like 80 by 40 by 16 feet high or something. It hosts lectures, plays, performances, dances, social events. Has a big, horse racing track outside. It was kind of, think of it like a mini county fairground.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Right.
Like a social space for tons of different.
Kind of like the Eisenhower complex, because they've got the all-star sports, with the go-karts and stuff like that, with the racetrack. Except there's no hotel at the agricultural center.
Right, but you're also a whole lot closer to many of the other hotels. You're close to the Diamond, to the square of the town. You're on the outskirts of town at the time, but he had a lot of options.
So they go and he gives the speech there. Do we know how many people showed up?
It is packed. So we don't know for sure the exact numbers. Again, we really have to rely hard on the newspapers.
Yeah.
For this, who are giving those accounts both before and after. We know in the prelude leading up to it, one of the newspapers is going to describe it as saying, this is going to be, simply when they announce he's coming, it's like, the agricultural hall will see the biggest attendance in its history because Frederick Douglass is going to be there. It's an established fact. And he is crazy famous in his time in a way that hasn't always been carried over to us today.
That's interesting. So, we did a recording yesterday of our new hit show, That's What She Said, with Veronica Brzezinski, Esquire, and Bethany Yingling. And Veronica couldn't make it because she had work to prepare for court today. So I sat in for her. And we were talking about, what are their names? Mary Thompson and Lydia Leicester. And Bethany had said something, basically saying, after hearing how Lydia Leicester, sold the horse bones and everything, and Beth's like, I don't think if I were in that situation, I would have thought of that. And I don't think I could have done these things. And it just wouldn't have occurred to me. And I said, I disagree with you there, Beth. And I'll tell you why. One, you're not a product of that time. If you were a product of that time, you would know exactly what you could use every bit of the horse for. After it's dead, what could you use it for? I mean, they make glue out of it. Like there's all these things that you could do. Soap. You would have been aware of that. And also, you've got to rebuild. You've got kids to take care of. You have to do it, sink or swim. You've got to survive, and you would figure out a way. That wasn't actually even the point of the conversation or bringing this up. The point was that from Beth's reactions to certain things that our guests shared about Mary Thompson and Lydia Leister, Beth seemed very surprised that, and I know she's not, but she seemed like kind of... Listen to the rest of this interview and dozens like it. Support the show and get early access to special episodes, early and discounted ticket sales, and more. The second lieutenant level and above gets access to all monthly Patreon episodes. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, choose a tier, and join. And I thank you in advance.